have my lab results here on a toxin report that we did, and it is very shocking to see what my results are considering how healthy we live and how much we do. It's actually more infuriating to know that as I go through this list with you and share what these results are, that these are all allowed into our food system and are all deemed acceptable levels by the FDA when they are anything but. So I went and got these lab results. For those of you who watched the video and listened to the podcast episode where I shared about my health update, that was this past fall, right before the week before Thanksgiving, I had a large tumor removed from my neck and shoulder. And after that, I got very, very sick. So there was a 6-week period of time where I would have maybe a day, maybe a half a day where I felt like I was getting better. And then I would come back down with a fever, extreme exhaustion, unable to do anything. There were quite a few days where I wasn't even able to get out of bed. And as I said, this went on for a 6-month period right after I had this tumor removed from my shoulder. Now, right before I went in to have this surgery, I was also experiencing for the past couple of years where I've had a lot of inflammation, and honestly, I've had quite a bit of weight gain. So over the past 2 years, I've gained over 20 pounds, despite not changing things in my diet, not anything that you would expect to see that type of weight gain. So I knew that something wasn't quite right, and had been trying all of the things that used to work. Like when you increase your exercise, I tried going back to keto. I tried doing high protein, like all of the things that in the past had worked for me, and none of them were working. But what was really strange is it wasn't just normal weight gain, if you will, but I would have a period where I didn't change anything that I was doing. And literally in a 1-week period, I gained 10 pounds. I mean, that is not normal. So I had exhausted everything that I knew how to do and was looking at needing to get some type of testing done or some type of answers because things weren't making sense. So I was actually talking to Carolyn, who's my best friend from Homesteading Family, and you may have caught their video that they did where they had lab work done too. So Carolyn had told me about this practitioner. I looked into her. I trust Carolyn's judgment. I was like, okay, I'm going to go ahead and make an appointment. So I had made the appointment to go and have my lab work done that just happened to coincide during the period during December when I was really, really sick. So I went and got the lab work done, and I got my lab results back in January, which I'm going to share with you what those lab results are right now. And they were very interesting and also quite shocking. So I had 4 toxins that I tested in the only 5% of people test as high as the levels that I had in my system. And then I had another 5 that were considered moderate, anywhere from about 25% of people in the total population that get these tests and have these levels high in their system, which is actually pretty shocking when you consider the lifestyle that we live. So what I tested really high, and in fact, the level that I tested the highest in, the practitioner, Dr. Tori, which I'll put information below this video, she has never had a patient test as high for levels of 10 as I did. And 10 was a really puzzling one because I grew up on a homestead where my mom canned in glass jars the majority of our vegetables, a lot of our fruit. I myself can the majority of our food. We're not eating food from tin cans. It's all done in glass. So it was really odd that I would test high in 10. And we even went through, she's like, I don't even know what would give you these high levels of 10. So it was very puzzling where this high level of 10 came from. Now, one of the other levels that I tested, actually the highest in as far as the percentile-wise and parts, is BPA. And the BPA, again, we're eating majority through glass jars, and I don't use plastic in our house, as in plastic storage containers, cooking, anything like that. We use glass. However, to-go coffee cups, I was a barista before I was a pharmacy tech. And when I was working as a pharmacy tech for 18 years, I would get coffee usually in the afternoon, early afternoon, late morning break, almost every day. And a lot of those to-go hot beverage cups have BPA in them. So I actually am like, oh, I know where my levels of BPA came from. They were from those to-go coffee cups. Now I work from home and I make coffee at home, but I'm not drinking it out of, I'm drinking it out of handmade pottery or those types of things. But when I do travel now, I make sure that any hot beverage that I get is actually put into my travel mug and that I'm not using any of those throwaway convenience lined with who knows all what, but apparently BPA coffee cups. So that mystery is kind of solved. So at least I'm not continuing to add that into my system, even though it wasn't coming from my at-home environment. Now, the other two areas that I tested really high in aren't quite as much of a surprise, being that we live in the Pacific Northwest where there is a lot of moisture. But I tested high for 2 mold toxins. So specifically alpha toxin G1 and ochratoxin A. Now, we were one of the things that's hard with mold, anybody who's ever dealt with mold, is sometimes you don't know where it is. I mean, sometimes, yes, it's very visible, but other times you can be exposed to it, or it can be in houses, it can be hiding behind walls, or it's in areas that aren't really visible to the eye. So it can be a little bit of a sneaky one. So we weren't sure if this was something that was a past exposure, because with a lot of these things, now obviously mold is not a forever chemical, but the BPA, some of these other things are what are considered forever chemicals, meaning that they stay in your system. Your system doesn't know how to get rid of them because they're not natural. So you can have an early exposure or a one-time exposure, and if it's enough, it's going to show as high elevated levels until you're able to get it out of your system by doing certain protocols. However, with the mold, those are one of those things, however, yes, they are natural, but when they get into your system, you don't necessarily pass and they stay in there unless you know how to do a detox protocol and are able to get them out, and you're not continually being exposed to it. So this one was a little bit tricky for us because we weren't sure, is this an unknown exposure that's a continual, that's ongoing, that I'm not aware of, or was this something that I was exposed to in the past? So our hypothesis was it was probably something that I was exposed to as a child because I grew up in a single wide mobile home, a single wide trailer, and it had the single pane windows. And for anybody who has lived in a camper trailer or in an older mobile home, metal trailer that had single pane windows, especially here in the Pacific Northwest, my mom was a fastidious house cleaner. So this has nothing to do with that. But no matter how often it seemed that we cleaned those windows, there was always a little bit of mildew mold that would just come back on them because they sweated and it was just almost impossible to keep, even though she cleaned them all the time. And mold's one of those things, you can clean it, but we can't see those spores, and that's why it keeps coming back. So we knew that I definitely was exposed to it as a child. It could be from that, but it also could be maybe something that was in our home that we just weren't aware of. So we went into doing the detox protocol, and then we knew when we retested, if those levels haven't went down, then that would mean it was something that was a continual exposure. But I did test very high. Again, in that only 5% of people test as high as I did for 2 of those mold toxins. Now, on my more moderate toxin levels, we have, of course, glyphosate, right? And I feel like probably everybody does have some amount of glyphosate in their system. Now, this one was moderate, and even though we grow a huge portion of our own food, we don't use any type of herbicide, pesticides, especially glyphosate, Roundup, in our food supply. There's even at this point, unfortunately, trace levels can be found in the rain, can be found in groundwater, like it's very much saturated. So I wasn't surprised to see some of it. And when I was younger, I didn't pay as much attention. So I wasn't eating organic, was eating stuff that I'm sure had higher levels in it. And that's kind of one of the things with all of these different toxins is, yes, small time exposure isn't going to matter that much. However, because it is so saturated within our crops, within our water system, like with everywhere, we're having all of these levels, and especially the older you get, the more and more that they add up. And the FDA continues, at least in the case with glyphosate, Roundup, to approve higher approved safe levels so that more and more is allowed into our food system. that will be a whole nother podcast episode when we talk about that. So that to say, I wasn't really surprised to see that I did have a moderate level of glyphosate. Some of the other levels, one is gadolinium. That is used for medical procedures so that they have better visibility for MRIs. And I did have an MRI before the tumor was removed, so that one I was not surprised. But again, it's really frustrating that our medical system, knowing that that's something that stays in the body and that doesn't pass and can have issues, that they don't talk about, hey, this is going to be in your system, and give you ways to detox from it. It's just very frustrating the way that our system is, that it just buries the head in the sand instead of addressing these things. Now, a few of the other moderates that I had was parabens, right? Parabens are in a lot of things, especially makeup and laundry soaps and detergents and beauty care, those types of things. And so even though all of that is clean now and has been for about 15 years, when I was a teenager and in my younger 20s and stuff, I didn't know about that. And so I just used whatever, makeup gave the best coverage or the color I liked or whatever of those types of things. And that's where, now that I'm in my 40s and I'm seeing a compound of problems, some of these things are things that you're exposed to in your youth, but our bodies, especially when you're talking about forever chemicals, which is going to be more along the lines of BPA, there's actually a list of 600 of them, PFOAs, which is an ingredient that was in Teflon. A lot of these chemicals, our body doesn't know what to do with them. They're not natural, so it doesn't have natural pathways to get rid of them. So its defense, once you reach a certain level where the body's like, hey, I don't know what to do with it, and I recognize that this is toxic or causing harms, is it puts it into our fat cells. So with the weight issue that I was sharing, that is one of the signs. And so the body will put it in the fat cell because that's a protective, where it's like, I'm locking you up and I'm putting you in jail because I don't know what to do with you, and I've reached levels that I feel are toxic. So this is my defense mechanism. So no matter what you do, the body is not letting go of those fat cells because it doesn't want to release it into your system. So it's a protective measure once it's reached this certain threshold. So forever chemicals is a little bit of I understand why that's used as the term. However, there are ways that you can get it out of the body by doing a detox. And I'm actually going to have Dr. Tori, who is my practitioner, come on a podcast episode. We'll release it here on YouTube. So if you have questions, leave them beneath this video because I'm going to be doing an interview with her. Now, I did get my test results back because I've been on the detox protocol, which I will be sharing parts of what that is and what my test results 5 months later, what they are reading now, in the next video. Now, I first started making all of these changes with our diet, with my cleaning products and our skincare when I first had initial health scare, which now has been a long time ago, but that is when I first started with food. So if you want to hear the story about how I healed my gut by changing out the foods that we eat, I've got this podcast series that you can go and check out, listen, read that blog post, and then I will see you back here with part 2.